I'm Mark Ahlstrom, President of the ESIG Board and VP of Renewable Energy Policy for NextEra Energy Resources. And I'm very happy to welcome you to the 2023 Spring Technical Workshop of the Energy Systems Integration Group. I see a lot of old faces, a lot of new, and if this is your first ESIG, I really welcome you. I think I speak for a lot of us who have been participating in ESIG for years that this is, these are my favorite meetings of the year. This is where we really get people together in a collaborative way where we can really have the discussions about how to find the pathways forward. I think ESIG is very unique. I think you will too. And thank you for the people that have come back for many, many years. We get so much out of this, working together to find the pathways forward. So welcome. If you're less familiar with ESIG, just briefly, ESIG is a global member-based nonprofit organization for those of us supporting the technical aspects of grid transformation and energy systems. We do this through workshops, tutorials, webinars, blogs, working groups, and task forces for our members, and by producing technical resource materials and briefing materials for decision makers and for those that are trying to enter this field and contribute as soon as possible. ESIG also serves as a leadership role in the Global Power System Transformation Consortium, sometimes called GPST, working to support a global clean energy transition. ESIG convenes key participants to chart the technical pathways in a way that is collaborative, reliable, economic, trusted, and sustainable. As you'll see this week, by getting the talented and dedicated technical people like you together at the right time to talk about the right things, ESIG really does function as a catalyst to make progress faster and better. That's really what we are. We're not going to advocate. We're here for you as our members and our participants. And I hope that more and more of you will continue coming and make this a regular part of your career and your life. This is really why I think we all participate, is to make a difference here, and to do it in a way that really makes sense. That's why your organizations, many of yours are members of ESIG. That's why Polaris System Optimization and NextEra contribute at sustaining member levels to support the ESIG mission. And that's why Polaris and WEG are sponsors of our workshop here this week as well. So thank you to all of those folks. It's also why the U.S. Department of Energy supports the unique and critical work of ESIG, and why other donors who see the benefits of technical collaboration for grid transformation and energy decarbonization support ESIG as well. And it's why many of us devote time and energy to making ESIG work, along with just a stellar staff that you'll meet here at ESIG this week that really make this organization work for all of us. And it's why your membership and participation in ESIG are so important. We're all involved in crafting the technical and engineering responses that are needed for our industry and by society. It's your memberships and your participation that really makes ESIG work. That's what we're all about here. I thank you if you're a member, if your organization is a member, and I strongly encourage you to consider joining if you're not currently a member. A modest annual membership fee is based on the annual budget of your organization. And if your organization joins, then everyone in your staff, all of your organization is a member of ESIG, and we encourage them all to participate. ESIG also has memberships that are very inexpensive for independent consultants and individuals, and free memberships for students of accredited educational organizations. ESIG is just a great place to learn and share your expertise, and we all need to do whatever we can to bring talented people into this industry and get them working immediately on the important issues. So thank you for being here. I think you'll tell that I'm passionate about this organization. I think you'll meet a lot of people here who are passionate about it. We're building systems that are important for society, and it takes all of us, all of you, to succeed in making this happen. So I can think of no better time to spend than with all of you, all the friends you'll make here. If you're new here, please do not be shy. Please introduce yourself to everybody. You're going to have some world-class experts here, but a lot of other people that are up and coming that are the future of what we need to do. So I hope you'll take advantage of the breaks and the social hours of reception and make sure that you talk to everybody you possibly can. That's what we're here for. And I hope you walk away with a much better set of friends and a much stronger network. So just briefly, I just want to do a little housekeeping here that, obviously ESIG is a convener. We want to have free and open conversations. As I say, ESIG does not advocate or have an official position unless it comes out of our working groups or task forces through the member collaboration at those bodies. But we're here to support you. Also, of course, we have many frenemies and competitors and people from all aspects of this. That's important. Obviously, we'll respect avoiding any sort of anti-competitive actions as we would with any such meeting. And also, we're extremely devoted here at ESIG to be open to all people, encourage diversity participation. We will not, tolerate any sort of harassment. We're very strict about this. This is a safe place for everybody, and we want to see people freely coming here and participating, and make it the most you can, and open to all. So with that as an intro, I'm just so honored to welcome you here. I'd now like to introduce our keynote speaker. Alice Jackson actually talked to us a few years ago at Denver, back when she was the president of Xcel Energy Colorado. And now Alice's title is Senior Vice President, System Strategy and Chief Planning Officer for Xcel Energy. I can think of no more perfect title for ESIG to have Alice here in this capacity. She leads a system strategy and planning organization for Xcel Energy. This organization is focused on integrated system planning, including strategically planning generation, transmission, and distribution for Xcel Energy's electric and natural gas systems to meet the zero carbon electric system and the net zero carbon gas system of the future. She also completed in 2017, completed the program for leadership development at Harvard University. And she is a proud Fighting Texas Aggie, where she earned a bachelor's degree in business administration with a concentration in management information systems. And she would also like to remind us that as a mother of 4 sons, she knows well that life is always an adventure. So let's continue that adventure together and hear from Alice to get us started. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Okay, now, I know we just had food and we're outside basking in the warm sun because pretty much all of us probably have come from some winter climate that we're still dreading the fact that there's snow on the ground, but let's try a little bit harder. Good afternoon, everyone. There we go. Okay, so, I should put y'all up against a competition because being a mom of 4 boys, my house is kind of loud and a little bit smelly most of the time. So I don't encourage the smell piece, but please feel free to be robust in your questions, dig into the answers that we are all searching, because that is why we are here. I had the fortune of sitting this morning in this room and listening to a couple of panels talk about the different technologies and modeling tools that are out there and the gaps that we still have. I'm going to integrate some of that into my discussion here too, because we are absolutely on the journey of a lifetime as the utility industry, as the energy industry as a whole, and all of the pieces that come together. And that journey is not one that's going to be finished anytime soon. But we have pretty much, from my perspective, the challenge of our generation to solve. And my apologies, I'm a wanderer. I really don't like these things. So I'm going to walk back and forth a little bit, and I'll try my best not to bump into anyone. But this journey that we're on didn't start yesterday. It started many decades ago on looking at where are things going to go. And I think there are 3 main areas that I'm going to touch on today to talk a little bit about what this journey is encapsulating for us right now. The first one is the obvious one. The system that we are facing is grounded in physics. So physics is a key part of making sure that this journey is going to be successful. And that ties into reliability for our customers and for the people, which is the second component of what I want to talk about, the people that we have the pleasure to serve, the people that are working on the systems, the people and the technologies that we need to be successful. And last but certainly not least, and yes, there is a triple P here, and that is the policy pieces. Because while the physics of the system dictates how things work, the people tell us how they want to use the systems. The policies that are created by the people kind of form how it is that we need to put things together. So those 3 things work interchangeably. Now, before I get into some of my deeper remarks, I always like to ground us a little bit. This is my only slide for the entire presentation because I think it's always a good reminder of why we do what we do. When you look at this, this is a nighttime map of the world from space. You see light in some areas, those pinpricks, and you see darkness in other areas. I would say that in the areas where you see light, which is what we do, which is what we produce, in those areas of light, there's health, there's wellness, there's vitality, there's opportunity for progress for the communities that sit in those areas. In the areas that are darkness, they want exactly what it is that is in those areas of light. And we're going to continue to see expansion of that light around the world. The question is how does it come to fruition? What's the speed at which it gets there? What's the cost for our customer base? But this is why we do what it is that we do. And I think it's always important for us to pause a little bit and think about and ground ourselves in what it is that we are driving towards, because we are driving for our communities to deliver on outcomes that give them those opportunities for health, for wellness, for vitality, and for opportunity for their families. So with that in mind, what is it that we are trying to accomplish? I'll start with a little bit, for those of you who are less familiar with Xcel Energy, we're an investor-owned utility that operates in the central US, 8 states. Think of it as we run from the northern borders of the country to the southern. So start in the upper peninsula of Michigan, move into Wisconsin, Minnesota, North and South Dakota, down through Colorado, and then the panhandle of Texas and eastern and southeastern New Mexico. When you pause and you think about that jurisdiction, you start thinking about, okay, there's a significant amount of diversity of geography, of politics, of density of people. But there is one thing that's uniquely familiar across all of those, is if you overlay that area with a wind and solar map, we're in a hell of a good spot. Which means that the transition for us might be slightly easier than others, but also a little bit faster and harder than others too. So I'm going to dig into some of the reasons and the things that we've been looking at in that region. As operating company president for 4 years in Colorado, and then regulatory lead there for about 6 years prior to that, I had the opportunity to walk through the policy side of the equation, as well as the physics side of the equation to where we are today. I'll give you a couple of numbers just to kind of ground us in the conversation on present day of what we're facing in our Colorado jurisdiction. I focus on the Colorado jurisdiction because it's kind of like an island. Any of you from HECO or Hawaii? Okay, you got a couple. So I would attest that our Colorado jurisdiction, even though it's smack dab in the middle of the United States, is kind of like Hawaii from an electrical connection perspective. I've got some of my transmission engineers in the back and they'd say hell yeah to that as well. So when it comes down to looking at that system, the reason I pull up some of the numbers and I start thinking about it is because this is what we are facing across the country. Hawaii's gotten there a little bit faster with wind and solar. You have a different type of load profile than many of the US states though as well. So Colorado, 7,100 megawatt peaking system, over 4,000 megawatts of wind already installed. We all know wind primarily blows at night. We're not at 7,100 megawatts in the middle of the night. So that means we have systems that we have to manage. Other pieces of the physics of the system for my transmission friends in the room. When you think about some of the transmission lines, we have a transmission line in Colorado that is over 100 miles long that has 100% digital load and generation. It's all wind. There's no load on the line whatsoever, and it's all wind generation. Those are problems we've had to solve, problems we've had to tackle to figure out how do you make that work on this evolving system. We've committed to our customers as Xcel Energy that we'll be at a zero carbon system by 2050. We were the first utility in the nation to make that commitment back in 2018. And here's a little secret that wasn't such a secret. We told everyone, we don't know how we're going to do it. What we did is we backed up to 2030 and we said 2030, we can hit an 80% carbon reduction by that timeframe. And we do know how we can get there. There's existing technology. Our modeling tools show us that it's possible. Is it a hell of a lot of work? Yeah, it is. And there's changes we have to put into the system, but it is possible for us to get there. We're in the middle of an electric resource plan process in Colorado where we're doing the greatest amount of resource acquisition we've ever done in our company's history in a single fell swoop, of which is going to deliver what we expect to be 80% of the energy that our customers consume in 2030 to come from a renewable resource and hit over an 85% carbon reduction in that same time frame. So let's go back to the framework for the conversation today, the physics of the system. How is it going to be done? When we look at the electric system in Colorado and we're building this out, we look at the tools that we use. We see the probabilistic modeling for the 8760s. We look at how do we put those together. What are the expansion plans that are necessary to meet the reliability and affordability of the system? What we can tell you is it's possible. What we can't tell you is it going to work 100% of the time with all the weather patterns that are coming our direction? That takes the modeling tools to the forefront and looking at what are the probabilities that we're going to be able to meet these outcomes. The tools sit there and indicate that in a perfect scenario, absolutely normal weather, you can do it. But then you've got to put the sensitivities around it and look at the tools and the outcomes that come from those to go, are you going to be able to do it in all scenarios, or do you need to make modifications? This transition is going to be dramatic in the next 7 years. We're going to retire thousands of megawatts off of our systems, and we're going to add gigawatts, probably around 10 to 12 gigawatts of renewables, back to that system that already has 4,000 megawatts of wind on it already. That is going to take control algorithms, that is going to take software engineering, that is going to take more visibility and sensors on our system than ever before. Do we believe that we can get there? Absolutely, but it's going to take people. How many of you are engineers that do system design modeling? Okay, quite a few. How many of you know 5 more friends you could hire that can do the same thing that you do? Not a single hand in this room. So we have a people problem that we have to look at and figure out, how do we train, how do we educate, how do we bring people to the table that know how to run these tools and models? So Xcel started approaching this problem slightly differently about a year ago now. And that was, as we said, you know, for a long time, we've been organized just like other utilities. We've had transmission planning and a transmission department. We've had generation planning. Actually, we had it as a standalone, but a lot of utilities have it in the generation or energy supply area. Same thing for distribution. Distribution planning was in a vertical and it was sitting there. And then last but certainly not least, our gas area had their own planning. They didn't frequently talk. Occasionally, they would bump into each other whenever there were discussions about interconnections for, you know, large generation assets. You might have a conversation at that point in time. But we didn't sit down and really optimize where things were going versus where there was capacity to add. Distribution, sure enough, did not speak a lot with transmission. Occasionally, whenever there was a distribution to transmission or transmission to distribution transformation substation being built. But these pesky little things called rooftop solar started coming in, and then the electrons were flowing the wrong way. Well, that changed the paradigm to have a conversation on what is it that we need to do. And now the paradigm has shifted even more to have the conversation of, does it actually make sense to incentivize it to be on the distribution system versus building it on the transmission system and save money for customers? Does that work better? How many of you have discovered a tool that allows you to optimize your modeling for resource selection in the expansion planning portion to choose between distribution or transmission interconnection? Okay, I see one hand. I'm going to want to talk to you later. How many of you have a model that currently allows you to optimize beneficial electrification from your natural gas distribution system to your electric distribution system? Okay, I see a couple more hands. I'm going to want to talk to y'all too. These are the gaps that we are facing right now, figuring out where are these robust tools to figure out how do we design this system of the future. Because many of us are facing all of these things from a policy front simultaneously. There are laws or counties or cities or ordinances that are currently passing no extensions of gas lines. There are laws or cities or ordinances that are currently considering prohibiting customers, individual customers, from no longer using gas home heating. Instead, they have to go with pumps, either using ground source heat pumps or some other type of heat pump in order to be able to replace it, but electrifying. That's a big deal when it comes to the energy intensity that you look at through the gas system versus the electric system. There's also the question about just looking at the gas system in and of itself and how it operates. Whenever we're talking about dramatic changes to renewables on the bulk system, and needing to have a gas capacity and the pressure in those pipes be ready for huge swings in wind. Whenever we have something either overspeed, we have cool fronts come through, or things along those lines. Pack and draft will no longer work on our major gas pipelines in this country. So how can we have firm gas loads for combustion turbines and other things? These are the big questions on the physics side that lead to the need for the people side in order for us to look at things but that are very much impacted by the policies that are being put in place. So you can see how those three things come together all the time in the conversations that we're having. So when Xcel saw these issues and we kind of saw them out on the horizon going, we need to change the way that we talk. And SRP was up here earlier talking about integrated system planning and how they're working on their modeling changes. We took it one step further inside of our company and we made a massive organizational change. And we did it in a way that is not usual and customary to utilities. Just out of curiosity, how many of you utility sector in here? Okay, so some of this should resonate with some of you. How many of you have been in the utility sector, but you've gone outside of it now? Okay, another mix. So lots of you have had touch bases on it. So typically, when you do a major reorganization inside of a company, you kind of bake it behind closed doors, and then you do the big reveal, right? It's typical kind of HR process and management of putting things out there. We took a very different tactic on this change. Last May, we announced that we're going to stand up an integrated system planning team and that we were going to move the planning functions from our operations arms, remember in those silos that I was talking about, and combine them into one, but we didn't know exactly how it was going to happen. And that we were going to take the next roughly 6 months to stand it up and to figure it out by talking with everyone. What we did is we went in and we started doing high-level process mapping. How do we do this inside of our company right now? How is planning done? Who touches it? Who has responsibilities for it? Is it all in one team and everybody in that team is just lift and move and simple? Or is it parts of different people that do it? What we ended up finding out is it was a mix. Some groups, it was pretty straightforward. It was a lift in place and move over. Others, it was like this person, it was 5% of their job. This person, it was 10% of their job. This person, it was 50% of their job. And so then we had to figure out, how do you make that happen? So from May of last year until September, we did those high-level looks and we said, this is the organizational structure that we need. What we decided on was a little bit different as well. Trying to break down those silos where people were not talking to each other, instead of setting it up as here's our new transmission planning, distribution, energy supply, and gas, and then having them report to a single leader, we said, no, we're actually going to break those up and we're going to put it into timeframes. So we set up an arm known as integrated system planning, and they're looking at the longer range. So they're kind of looking out over the horizon of going, what's coming our direction? They run the electric resource plans. They build the distribution system planning activities. They're doing the clean heat plans for the gas system. All of those things get formed in this team. And what they do is they look at, okay, what are the new technologies that are coming our direction? What are the different pieces of the puzzle? What's going to be built between year 3 and year 40 on the system? What does the distribution system have to look like in order to meet the needs of the customer? And that's a huge conversation point. We really do have a lot of knowledge around the generation component, especially the bulk generation interconnected at the transmission level. We know a lot of the technologies. Yes, there's going to be improvements. Yes, there's going to be cost reductions, but there's a lot known in that segment of how we're going to get to the zero carbon system. We have to find more dispatchable zero carbon resources that have flexibility associated with them. But with the advent and the investigation that's going on in hydrogen or other clean carbon fuels, those are lots of opportunities in those spaces. I'd say when you move to transmission, there's a lot of the same thing there too, is we generally understand what our resources are available there. Do we need to fix the problems we're having with interconnection queues and getting lines built? Absolutely. But the infrastructure physics side of it, we're pretty decent there. When you step into distribution, we have a distribution system that has been brought into fruition today over the past, I know for Colorado, it's over 150 years of existence. Now, I'm not saying assets that were put in ground 150 years ago are still in usage today, but we have roughly, let's call it 70 years of different technologies that have come together and that are operating on the system today, whether it's the wood poles or it's some of the transformers or other things. But that system, I would hypothesize, is going to largely be turned over in the next 25 years. The reason being, if we are talking about an evolution in how our customers are going to use our systems, think of the electrification of the transportation system, the potential electrification of home heating, whether it's in total, as some people advocate, or some percentage, I can guarantee it's going to shift. When you think about how customers, we might need them to interact with us differently in operating the system to get to a zero carbon, think particularly about the last 3 to 5 or even 7% of the zero carbon energy needs we have to get to on the system. We're going to need a different relationship with that customer base in order to manage things. When you think about the distribution system and you go into each substation, every feeder is a fingerprint. Because every feeder, even if you had the exact same length of feeder, the exact same wire, number of transformers, same types of customers, those customers choose to use the system differently. So therefore, when you think about managing that distribution network, what are the answers we need to bring to the table? What level of visibility, communication that you need to have? Those are the questions we're grappling with today. As a planning function inside of a utility or any planning function anywhere, the way you typically build plans, you know where you are, you know where you want to go, and you build your pathway in between the two. The where we want to go when you focus on this distribution network right now is a little bit of an unknown, because that's really dependent on defining what does that customer look like, I would argue, in 2050. 2050 is what we're pointing towards for the zero carbon system. Some states and some areas are faster than that. For example, Minnesota just passed a law to get there in 2040, so we'll have to adapt and do things along those lines, right? But when you think about the system and where we're going, it is time to define what that infrastructure needs to look like in 2050, because it's going to take us every last bit of these next 25 years to make sure that that distribution system is where it needs to be to serve that customer, and to be able to integrate what it is we're looking at from a resource perspective and the other upstream pieces of the system. So what do we have to do? We have to make some bets. And guess what? We're gonna be wrong. The question is how wrong? How do you put enough risk mitigation into the flexibility of the plans that you are putting together in order to be able to pivot, in order to be able to make changes to what it is that you have hypothesized or made your bets on to identify what it is that system needs to look like? But I would argue that until we sit down and we look at and we sit there and go, this is what we think our customer base is going to look like, this is what we think that they're going to demand of us, and to begin to evolve our systems, we will not be successful in meeting what it is that our customers need: reliability, affordability, and clean. That affordability piece is a really interesting animal to layer in here. And that is we could ignore 2050 and just say, okay, we're just going to focus on 2030. But on average, the assets that we put in the ground to make capital investments on, they average 30 years of life. On the distribution system, you're closer to 60, which means the things we're putting in the ground today are going to be there in 2050. So I feel that that puts the onus on us as the providers for these customers to define what this path looks like so that we can make sure that we're not going to rebuild this system multiple times on our way to 2050, which means, unfortunately, there's going to be some risk, because you're going to have to make some decisions in order to define then what is the infrastructure that you have to invest in and construct in order to be able to meet the physics of the system to serve the people that you are committed to. And heaven forbid, the policy comes out to pick the winners and losers too early. Because that's the other complicating factor. There's a lot of people out there right now that are pressing for certain answers that are prescriptive. That will not lead to success for our customers. And it may impede the affordability piece. It could impede the physics piece. But the really important piece on the policy is to make sure that we have a platform where we can look at a variety of options, where we can give groups like ESIG the opportunity to do research and analysis to provide information back into the process to help solve the problem, to work with NREL, to work with NCAR, to work with all of the other agencies that are out there to make sure that we are doing what we need to do. But once again, what I will tell you is in this journey, we have to expect things are not always going to work. And that's another policy hurdle that many of these systems are going to face. There's not a single, or I would say, there's not a single utility regulator that I know out there that will voluntarily sit there and say, yeah, fail 10% of the time, we'll pay for it, not a problem. It's not going to happen. But when you look at how do you manage the system and what is it that we need to put together, we have one of the most tremendous evolutions that we are going through ever in this industry. And we're going to have to ask for, we're going to need to have a little bit of grace as we go through this process, because getting to success is going to take some trial and error. So how do we build that into the conversation? How do we include others in this journey with us to make sure that we can deliver on the outcomes that we all want, but that we can also look at how do you build around the right things? It's not about a specific technology. It goes back to the physics of the system. As operating company president, I had lots of opportunities to visit with legislators. And I'll tell you, I always hated to have the conversation, especially with a new legislator that had just come into office, that had really passionate perspectives on energy. Because the conversation I had to have with them was, regardless of your perspective, regardless of your politics, and regardless of your preferences, you cannot control the laws of physics. Because frequently we would get laws that were drafted that said, use this because this is the outcome. You'd be like, actually, you just broke some things in here, because they wouldn't work with the system. And I'm not talking just the policy system. They would not work with the physics of the system that was out there. This is hard for people to understand because what we do is complicated. But because what we do is complicated, we've done such a good job of it for all these people that have the pinpricks of light, I can tell you not many of them are walking up to the wall each morning going, God, I hope this works today. Which means they think it's easy. Which means policy must be easy because what we're in is easy to most of the people in our environment. So that comes back to the people again. How do you have them in the conversation? How do you talk to them about what this journey to 2050 or earlier is going to look like? How do you talk to them about the fact that when they electrify their vehicle, they're going to go to zero on their fuel cost, but their electric bill is going to go up? And that should be logical, right? But it's also emotional because, oh my goodness, instead of the gas bill or the electric bill that they're paying in December, whenever it's really cold outside and they're having to heat their home, be $100 higher than what they had the year before. What happened? Who raised the rates? It doesn't always connect. So if we think about how much is going to be electrified, McKinsey did this study, and they looked at if we went to the 1.5-degree scenario, and the policies that were in place across the US or were being contemplated by the variety of states were put into effect, how much would we see of the nation's energy needs come through the electric grid in 2050 versus how much we're coming through it today? When they looked at today, they posited that across the nation, roughly 22% of the energy needs of the entire nation came through the electric grid. When they looked at 2050 at the 1.5-degree scenario, 76% of the entire nation's energy needs were coming through the electric sector. When you think about the utility bill, if you're at 22% of the energy needs today, but you're going to be at 76% in the future, how do you think emotionally people are going to react to that being on that bill? So there's a lot of pieces of the puzzle that we have to consider. There are gaps that we continue to need to fill. I will tell you, I absolutely love the team that I formed. We've got that piece that's looking up at the upfront. When the technologies are selected and they come ready to be constructed, it hands to another team who does the project management. We have a standalone team that is doing all of the modeling. And I am so excited about bringing these modelers together because these modelers are incredibly intelligent people that look at problem solving and figuring out how do we put the world together in the way that it needs to be put together. But they haven't had the opportunity or the need to talk more so than they do now. By putting them in a single team with all the tools in that place, it gives them the opportunity to learn cross-functionally, to problem solve together, to have more robust conversations. But it also gives us the opportunity to build the core of looking at how these things come together. Having those people in one group will give us lots of opportunities for growth and for testing of these new tools that we need. I'm firmly convinced, and I saw some of you raise a hand when I asked, because I've searched all over the place, but I've yet to find a tool that will optimize distribution infrastructure for gas and electric simultaneously. I know Synergy has an electric system and a gas system. We use both of them inside Xcel, but they still do not talk. So figuring out what does that look like as we transition our systems and the tools that we need, that's another piece of the puzzle that we have to bring together. That is where ESIG has opportunities. Those panels that happened this morning to talk about what it is that we need to close the gap on, those are the ones that can help us move the technology forward that helps everyone, because it's not just about one utility. They have to the tools have to start talking to each other. The other thing that I love about the utility industry is also the fact that we don't compete against each other as utilities. We can talk about competition all the time between, independent power producers and utility ownership, but we don't have to go there. At the end of the day, when you talk about physics and solving the physics problem of getting to zero carbon, we are not competing. We are working together. So putting the problem statements out there for the characteristics of what is unsolved in order to find the technologies, that is something that we get to come together on. And that's where entities like EPRI's lower carbon resources and those initiatives, those activities help us to start closing those gaps. It's the modeling piece of it and how we're integrating these systems together where ESIG comes to the table and fills even more of the gaps on what it is that we have to do to be able to analyze the probability of meeting the physics needs of the system at the end of the day with the selections that we're making. At least that's the way I think of it. When we look at where all of this is going and how do we bring it together, there are going to be a variety of stops and starts. There's going to be a variety of organizational changes. Xcel made a selection to go the direction that we're going. That modeling team serves all of my other functions. And there's one other piece of it that I should mention. Not only did we pull in the verticals that are associated with the transmission planning, distribution planning, energy supply planning, and gas, we picked one other that we thought was pretty integral in the process. And it was deliberate to make a natural tension inside of our group between where we are and where the operations team is. And that is we pulled all of standards, design, operating, and maintenance, as well as the compliance program development into our team as well. And I know many of you are engineers, and I don't mean any insults or anything along those lines. My father was an engineer, and I will tell you, when he built something, it was perfect, as long as it worked. If it worked, it was perfect. And until it broke, there was nothing you needed to do to it. When it broke, you got to re-engineer the whole thing, and it was a lot of fun. When we look at our systems, we aren't necessarily broke, but we recognize that the future is going to be very different than the past. And sometimes it's hard to move from something that's working, even and with the proof that it's had in the past, to an environment that we're going to be in the future. So we created the natural tension inside of the company to put standards inside of the integrated system planning team, because we are very much having to maintain the system of the past at the same time as we're moving it to the future. And so in order for our standards to be consistent, to make sure we're building the safety aspects into it, to make sure that we're looking at the consistency of the systems, we put that group on our team so that as we are bringing in the new technology, we are building in those standards and we're moving it quickly in to our day-to-day work. You might not think of that initially as something that's important. We didn't originally think it was as important as when we started this process. We're now roughly 9 months in, and we're finding that it's even more important than we ever thought. And that is because it touches so many different areas of our business. It touches every corner of the existing system. And so when you think about that in the conversations, when you sit down and you talk with the field operators, you talk with our linemen and our field workers about what are the pain points. If you're designing a new system of the future, you want to know those so that you can correct those in the process of building the new. So there are benefits of having this folded in to your integrated planning. And I would advocate that there are going to be other areas that we touch on from time to time that are going to be important to fold in or maybe carve out. And it's going to ebb and flow as we move through time. I want to touch on one thing on the people side. And I don't know if the lady from SRP is still here. I can't see you, but you did a great job in your presentation. There was one bullet in there that said, number one, it's going to take longer than you expect. And then she had in a parenthetical, even longer. It is so true when it comes back to the people side. There's a lot of excitement about this transition that we're in the energy industry. We have more people than ever curious about coming into our industry. How many of you went to high school or college going, yes, utilities, that's where it is? Nobody. I mean, not a brave soul in here wants to raise their hand. Okay, we got a couple. There you go. I was like, surely in this group, there's at least one, right? I will tell you, when I went to high school and I went to college, utilities were not anywhere in my sector. Believe me, I was grateful for the coolness, especially in my home in Houston during the summers, but it wasn't something that I thought of. It wasn't something I thought of until I had the opportunity back in 2001 to program a shadow settlement system for ERCOT when it was deregulating. That was the very first time I truly got involved in how electricity works. And it's an amazing thing. When I took my job with Xcel was just that, a job. Something that would provide for my family, that had some opportunity for growth, that I could learn from and that was inspiring. About a year and a half to working at this utility, I had a really interesting revelation. And it ties back my pinpricks map. And that is I could have gotten a job in social work and given back to my community that way. But there would have been a subset of people that I had the pleasure to serve in that environment. As a utility provider, we have a significant responsibility. That is that every single customer we have the pleasure to serve in our jurisdictional territories, we are providing them a life essential. You touch every single life in that area that you have the pleasure and the opportunity to serve. So while I didn't go to high school and college going, yes, utilities, that's where it is, I sincerely hope that I have the opportunity to retire from a utility. Because these pinpricks of life and light, they matter. And what we are all doing to figure out how to increasingly clean up our energy sector, to maintain, if not exceed and improve the reliability of the system, and make sure we do it in a way that doesn't break the bank for our customers, there's not a more noble job, in my opinion, that we could have. I'm excited to be on this problem-solving adventure with all of you. There are going to be gaps. There are going to be things that go sideways. But I encourage all of you to continue to look at how do we continue to advance and make this future something even better than what we imagine it can be today. Thank you for the time to give my opening comments. I'm happy to take a few questions if we have time for those, and I can dig into anything. I'm also, just fair warning, sitting on a panel in a little bit, so you can quiz me there too. But the other people are way more important and interesting. So, so happy to answer any questions or thoughts that you may have about my comments.
Well, thank you. Introduction here. I mean, I think the amount of opportunity, the need for people to enter the space and the job security for all of us here is a little bit overwhelming, but I hope we look at it as a positive, and that's why we're here. And our conversations for the rest of the week should show that. I'd now like to welcome the Executive Director of ESIG to the stand for his testimony, Charlie Smith, for his meeting and industry overview.
Helps to turn it on. Is that better? Ah, okay.
Power system stuff.
Yeah, yeah. You got to actually flip switches. I was thinking about back to my early days at Con Edison back in the 70s. And there was some complaints from the city council about fish kills, and I think it was the East River, over the heated effluent from some power plants around the East River. And there was a city council meeting and a lot of hot air over the hot water. And one of there was a guy from Con Edison on the stand being grilled, and he said, well, we can't change the second law of thermodynamics. And the city council guy said, why not? Let's repeal it. So attempts have been made to repeal the laws of physics. Okay, so I'm going to give you a little overview of what's happening here the next 2 days. I think that most of you have read the agenda. We just had a great couple of morning sessions and a great keynote from Alice. We're going to have a great opening plenary after this, and then 4 sessions tomorrow morning, tomorrow all day, interregional transmission, EVs, grid forming requirements, and some power system operation topics, with the award ceremony and networking reception last night, which I think is always a high point of our events. And then 4 more sessions on Wednesday on IBR studies, resource adequacy, planning implications with storage and IBRs. And I really encourage you to stay around for the closing plenary on flexibility and sector coupling. We put a lot of thought and effort into that with our member from EnergyNet, Anders Hansen, who will be chairing that session. So encourage you to stick around. And then for our working group and task force meetings, of course, for those of you who participate in those on Thursday. I thought I would open on a light note. It dries the washing using the very latest technology, a combination of solar and wind power. And I was very glad to see that, because there's a recognition of the growing importance of solar and wind power, and also the complementary nature of solar and wind power. And this is the chart from Lazard that I try to update every year to give you the latest thinking on what the unsubsidized cost of energy is at the end of the last year, and then the what's going on in the real world with the effects of the subsidies that are available that you can see in the power purchase agreement prices. There was no update from Lazard this year. I said, that's kind of strange. I wonder what's going on. I think there's a couple of things going on. I think one of the things is the kind of broken supply chain, the fact that couldn't get a lot of materials for projects last year. I think the concern over the IRA, what the IRA has done to prices across the board, and probably inflation. They know that inflation has made an impact on prices. Things have gone up. So I couldn't find any other source of comparison like Lazard does. So I just left the numbers in there from 2021. They've changed. I'm sure they've changed. Probably solar and wind have gone up a bit. I don't know that coal or gas turbines have come down any, but the power purchase agreement prices haven't changed. The picture, I think, is still fairly accurate, if not quite as good as the regular Lazard update. The impact of inflation, you can see from this this chart here. It's something that was from a presentation from NextEra Energy last year to the financial community. They looked at the impacts of inflation on the levelized costs of existing and new natural gas, as well as new wind and solar. And basically what it shows is that in 2021, the headroom between the cost of a new gas-fired unit and the cost of wind and solar was about 40%, and that headroom increased to about 50% in 2022. So yes, there was inflation, but it was across the board. It affected everybody, and it only made wind and solar look better going from 21 to 22. 22 to 23, the story is yet to be told. Storage, same thing from Lazard, nothing new, but I would point out that second line there on utility scale PV plus storage, the solar hybrids. The typical comparison there is for a storage plant. It's about half the rating of the PV plant it's tied to with a 4-hour battery. And Lazard was looking into 2021 at energy from that plant at $85 a megawatt hour. And I compared that with the lowest PPA bid I could find out there at El Paso Electric, a PV plus battery at $21 a megawatt hour. So the impact of the subsidies, and this was before the IRA, are very significant and make a very big difference. And then on hydrogen, we're going to be hearing a lot about hydrogen. I think for the foreseeable future, this is a chart that probably didn't change too much, also from Lazard from the year before. You look at the cost of hydrogen as a function of the electrolyzer capital cost and the energy cost to run the electrolyzers. Capital cost of the electrolyzer going from about $500 to $750 a kilowatt across the top, and the cost of charging energy going from $20 down to $60 a megawatt hour down the side. And you see for those different combinations, a cost of hydrogen going from about $1.76 per kilogram down to about $4.75 per kilogram. So that's the sort of the operating space I think that we're looking at for the next decade or so, moving from the high end of that to the low end of that. And there's a lot being done with hydrogen now, a lot being talked about as far as the cost outlook is concerned, and the impact of the IRA, the IRA on the cost of hydrogen. I heard a number, I guess it was today at lunch, of $3 a kilogram, which would really move the needle on a lot of the numbers you see in that box. Okay, Credit Suisse Investment Bank, a research note from last September. I'm not going to read everything here, but there's a couple of things that jump out, that stuck out at me. And one of those is that by 2029, US solar and wind could be the cheapest in the world at less than $5 per megawatt hour, the bank projects. $5 a megawatt hour? Well, that's after the IRA. That's a pretty aggressive number, but that's what the bank was telling its customers. And for big corporations, the IRA definitively changes the narrative from risk mitigation to opportunity capture. And then the final statement there, it's really a shocking reversal of the past 40 years. It's such a change that it hasn't yet been metabolized by the world of people involved in the issue. That's kind of a shocking statement for a bank to make to its customers, its investors, but it's indicative of the kind of thing that's going on and the impact that the IRA is having. More recently, NARUC, November of 2022. I forget if it was a panel session or a whole meeting that was talking about the IRA. Again, friends from NextEra Energy Resources participating in the meeting, and one of the quotes in the middle there is, with the IRA, NextEra expects wind coupled with a 4-hour battery system will cost $14 to $21 a megawatt hour. Solar with batteries will cost $17 to $24 a megawatt hour, company estimates. That's later this decade. An existing natural gas-fired power plant will cost $35 to $47 a megawatt hour to operate, assuming gas is in the $4 to $5 a million BTU range. Think about those numbers. Those are pretty amazing numbers. And the final quote there from Walsh, the DOE Office of General Counsel. I think he is the General Counsel. We have a once-in-a-lifetime set of initiatives that are on the table. The biggest risk for ratepayers would be a failure to capitalize on that right now. So, tremendous opportunity. A word about hydrogen. We heard a little bit about hydrogen from Alice. This is a chart from the BP Energy Outlook a couple of years ago. They did 3 scenarios in their analysis. One that's the green line on the right. The green line that you see is the business as usual scenario. The orange line just above that. So there's the business as usual. There's the moderate scenario. There's the accelerated scenario in terms of the rate at which they plan to meet the net zero carbon target. And you can see on the left-hand side, under the rapid scenario, the amount of green hydrogen that's in production globally. And the green is the green hydrogen, the blue is the blue hydrogen. That's the hydrogen from methanation with carbon capture and sequestration. And as you go to the net zero scenario, those numbers probably a little bit more than double. On the right-hand side, you'll see the annual average increase in wind and solar capacity. This is average annual increase. And where we are around 2020, we're around globally, somewhere around here, around 250 gigawatts per year of installed wind and solar capacity. Under the big net zero scenario, the blue scenario, you see that increasing to around 1,000 gigawatts per year by 2040. 4 times what the world is producing today. I've seen those same kind of numbers for what we need to do to meet our own carbon reduction plans, about a factor of 4 increase in the installation of renewable energy capacity. The line that really blows me away is the top line up here, the dotted blue line, which is net zero with 100% green hydrogen. And that's pushing 1,300 gigawatts per year. The numbers are massive. You know, the size of the job before us is tremendous. Interconnection queue, the bugaboo of new renewable capacity installation. So on the left-hand side is the existing capacity going from 2010 to 2021. On the right-hand side is the interconnection queue going from 2010 to 2021. The big change in the capacity is that there was a lot more natural gas and a bit less coal over the last decade. The big change in the interconnection queue is that there's a little bit less wind. Clumsy fingers. There was a little bit less wind in the interconnection queue going from 2010 to 2021, but look at the jump in solar, the orange there. And then look at the battery capacity that entered the queue, almost 400 gigawatts battery capacity that entered the sum of the queues around the country. So the installed capacity went from something like 1,000 to 1,200 gigawatts. The queue went from something like 400 to 1,400 gigawatts. I saw a number just a month ago. I didn't see backup for it though, so I didn't put it in here. And that said that the queue in the last year had gone from about 1,400 gigawatts to 1,800 gigawatts. Talk about a broken process. How are you going to install anything new when you're looking at a queue that's got 1,800 gigawatts of capacity in it? A lot of it's been there for, I don't know, 5, 7, 8 years. And that's a really broken process that needs to be fixed. This is a slide from ERCOT that Julia helped me put together. Looks at the numbers that you see when you look in the ERCOT queue. You see the blue at the end of 2022 had about 3 gigawatts of batteries. It's just the battery interconnection queue. You can see in purple there, the interconnection agreement signed financial security posted. So that's another 4 gigawatts of batteries this year, 7 gigawatts the year after. And on top of that, you see the interconnection agreement signed with no financial security. And that's another gigawatt or 2 in the out years. So out by 24, 25, you're looking at 12, 13 gigawatts of capacity. But how much capacity is really in the ERCOT interconnection queue? How much battery capacity? If you dig that number up, it's 88 gigawatts. And you go look in the number of the capacity that's either posted financial security or has a signed agreement with no financial security, and it's only 12. So there's a tremendous difference between what's officially posted on the interconnection queue charts and what's actually been entered into the backlog. And it's like that all over the country, different metrics and different interconnections. I think CalISO shows something like 12 or 15 gigawatts in their queue. They've actually got about 60 gigawatts, batteries, just batteries I'm talking about now in their queue. Installations, I don't track this near as closely as I used to because the numbers are all over the place. But like I say, you know, among friends, what's 50 gigawatts more or less? Wind is around 950 gigawatts. PV is around 1,100 gigawatts worldwide. And right now, the world is installing about 250 gigawatts a year. The US, this is from the EIA, shows the source of the kilowatt hours that are being produced. You see about 20% is from renewables, 20% from nuclear, 20% from coal, about 40% from natural gas. And coal is on a fairly rapid decline, and natural gas is on a fairly rapid incline. Renewables kind of on a steady incline, nuclear holding pretty flat. Some recent industry trends. I'm sure most of you have heard about that wild-eyed radical organization in Washington called the Edison Electric Institute. Been around for probably 100 years, representing our nation's investor-owned utilities. EEI is advocating for policies that support our clean energy transition. Wow, like my eyes kind of popped open when I read that. And this is a quote from Tom Kuhn, the president of EEI. We voiced our support for America rejoining the Paris Agreement, as well as getting critical transmission and energy grid infrastructure built more quickly. That's kind of the hidden problem underneath the surface, that if you don't build more transition, none of this is gonna happen. Little bit from NextEra again. Their plan to decarbonize completely by 2045. The plan includes converting 16 gigawatts of gas turbine to run on green hydrogen by 2045. That'd be a pretty big commitment to green hydrogen. And the small modular reactors, there's a lot of buzz about them. I just saw this probably a week or two ago. NewScale, one of the developers of a small modular reactor in UAMPS, the Utah Associated Municipal Power Systems, I think it is, that's got an agreement to buy the first plug of reactors out of there, announced the price increase from $58 a megawatt hour to $89 a megawatt hour. That was after the application of about a $30 a megawatt hour tax credit from the ERA. And the big reason that was given for the price increase is 75% increase in construction cost estimates. And there was also a delay of a couple of years. That's a story has played out before, as you know. Green hydrogen. I think I said this the last time. The green hydrogen pipeline exceeds 250 gigawatts worldwide. I read that the first time. I said, no, they got 3 zeros wrong. It must be 250 megawatts. No, it's 250 gigawatts. Look around, 60 gigawatts down in Texas, 50 gigawatts in Australia, 25 gigawatts in Germany, 50 gigawatts in the Middle East. Pretty soon, the numbers add up to 250 gigawatts. A lot of gigawatts. The DOE hydrogen shot, launched in June 21, seeks to reduce the cost of green hydrogen by 80% from $5 to $1 per kilogram, or $8 a million BTU. So think back to that chart I showed you in the beginning from Lazard with the hydrogen costs on it. A very, very dramatic, very ambitious goal, but it's similar to the sunshot goal that they had 10 or 15 years ago to get the cost of solar down from whatever it was to a few cents a kilowatt hour. So very ambitious, but I think indicative of the ambition not only in the US Department of Energy, but European, Australian, other departments around the world as well. And the new EU hydrogen strategy, last number I saw was the Commission has a target of 100 gigawatts of green hydrogen capacity by 2030, with 40 gigawatts of that coming from electrolyzers made in Europe. VPPs, I won't spend too much time on that. Not a lot's happened that I can see in the last 6 to 12 months, but I think the Sunrun providing 20 megawatts of capacity from a VPP and the ISO New England capacity market last summer was a first for the country. Offshore wind, a lot of action going on there. Big announcement, both in Europe, the Repower EU action plan, looking to grow wind from 190 gigawatts to 480 gigawatts by 2030. That's a pretty ambitious plan. Ambitious plan in Denmark. They've approved the plan to build an artificial island for a 10 gigawatt wind hub in the North Sea, which would not only produce electricity, but also store electricity and produce green hydrogen. Plans like that are cropping up all over the world. Electric vehicles, The bans on internal combustion engines continue to grow. Since the last time I looked at this, New Jersey, China, and the European Union have implemented bans effective in 2035. GM plans to end the sale of all gasoline and diesel powered passenger cars and light duty vehicles by 2035. And this one Gemini battery caught my eye. Achieves a 752-mile range in a Tesla Model S, a 200 kilowatt hour battery that fits into the current 100 kilowatt hour compartment. So lithium ion phosphate battery without cobalt at the same price as the current 100 kilowatt hour battery is planned by 2026. I had my first experience with an electric vehicle when I was in Europe a couple of weeks ago. Ralph, I'm going to tell a story about you. So, we were, I guess, Julia and Jason and myself were at a meeting in Brussels with the European Union on a GPST project. And we planned to go down on the Friday to see Ralph down at Amprion in Germany, over in Dortmund. And lo and behold, Thursday they were announcing, okay, the trains are all going to be on strike on Friday morning. So anybody that's planning on taking a train anywhere better get a backup plan. So Jason went out to the airport and got an electric vehicle. And we figured electric vehicle, hey, we need to put our money where our mouth is. We try this electric vehicle. So this was my first experience on an all-electric vehicle. We contacted Ralph and asked if Amprion had capabilities to recharge electric vehicles at their headquarters. And Ralph said he would look into it and got back to us. And sure enough, they did. They had 2 EV chargers. But what he didn't tell us was that they had load management controls on the EV chargers, and they only charge for 2 hours. So we got down there, and I think we were down to about 20% battery. We said, yeah, we'll charge the battery up. We'll get it back up to 100% back to Brussels. No problem, Friday night. So we come back after our meeting, like a 3-hour meeting. The battery should be charged. I don't remember exactly what it was, somewhere in the 70 to 80% range. But we looked at it and said, probably not going to make it back to Brussels. So I had my first experience of range anxiety with an electric vehicle. So we're driving back and we're watching, the little indicator shows how much your battery has left and how much you need to get to where you're going. It starts off, we've got more than enough to get back. And after about 15 minutes, we've got just about enough to get back. And after about a half an hour, we don't have enough to get back. Well, we better find a charging station. So we had a nice app, we found the charging station and filled it up and made it back to Brussels with no problem. But Jason and I were talking, I think Julia was asleep in the back seat, as I recall. But we were talking about the range anxiety issue because we were both experiencing it, watching the needles on the dash. And Jason said, yeah, this is kind of what it's going to be like in 10 years after the electric vehicles have taken over and there's no gas stations left and you're still driving a gas-powered vehicle. So, I thought that was an interesting perspective on things. Bulk storage, it's pretty exciting things happening there. In addition to the storage plans here, a couple of very ambitious storage plans in China. One is on batteries, where they hope to have 100 gigawatts of battery capacity in place by 2030. And also, oh, by the way, 100 gigawatts of hydro pump storage capacity. That's a pretty amazing number. What do they have today? 20 gigawatts, I think, 26 gigawatts. Big plans. And then in Australia, there was a procurement that just took place with AMO with some assistance from ARENA. And they're looking at installing 8 batteries between 200 and 300 megawatts, a total of 2 gigawatts. All will be grid forming, capable of providing system services, I think to be installed by 2026. Some more scenarios from BP, just showing the rate of increase of renewable growth and the rate of decrease of the solar, of the coal and the natural gas for the different scenarios. But basically the story is dramatic growth in renewables, and depending on the scenario, gradual or dramatic decline in the coal-fired capacity as well as the gas capacity. Just a word about ESIG. Some of the organizational operational infrastructure. We have 3 user groups, 2 that I think you know about, the operations and maintenance user group. And the probabilistic forecasting and planning and operations user group is just getting off the ground. And we're talking with DOE about a new user group for good enhancing technologies. It's in the planning stage right now, not off the ground. And I just want to show you this so you have some sense of all of the activity that's going on within the working groups, 5 working groups. And under the working groups, we have task forces, and some of the task forces have planning teams. I'm not going to read them all to you. You can see them on the website, but just to give you some sense of the expansion of activity and the number of things that are going on inside of ESIG, supported with funding, some of it from DOE, some of it from foundations, some of it from membership dues, but really big expansion of our activity in the last couple of years. A word about some upcoming events, the meteorology and markets workshop and the load forecasting workshop. Going to get 2 for the price of 1 again this year in Denver in June. The fall workshop is going to be in San Diego towards the end of October. And then our spring workshop will be back here next year, the last week of March again. I want to close with just a mention of, actually there's a couple of IEEE Power and Energy magazines out there on the desk now that various of us have served as guest editors for over the last year or two. They've got very nice summaries of the state of the art of different aspects of the energy system integration and energy system growth picture around the world. I also want to welcome everyone who's here. I think we've got about people from a dozen different countries that are here with us at our, as Mark said, largest in-person meeting that we've had. Really great to be back after the COVID. I'm just curious, let me see a show of hands. How many people are here for the first time at an ESIG meeting? Wow, I'd say that's half, maybe half or more. And I want to encourage everybody that's here to take the opportunity to meet the people that have come here for the first time, as well as the people that have been coming here for a long time. It's really a great bunch of people. We've been doing this for about 35 years now. It's a long time. We've accumulated a lot of interest, a lot of good knowledge and education. I think that people are very willing to share with each other. So Australia, Colombia, United Kingdom, Korea, China, Belgium, Germany, Denmark, Japan, Canada, Vietnam, Ukraine, and I can't fail to mention the great nation of Texas. So welcome, all of you. And I guess that's the end of my remarks, and thank you very much.